find a button. So with this assignment, I want you to be looking at different ways that we can animate text. The end assignment will have 3 different text pieces, 3 different animation methods used, okay? So don't use the same method for each one. Use something different. If you think of something even outside the box, you could definitely try that also. So I'm going to go over a couple of these today. Same concepts, just a different way to apply them. This one here, this is like super simple. I just created a shape. So this shape right there. And I just animated that shape just coming in and going out. That's no big deal. And then I just duplicated it, obviously, and offset the sides. And then this other word is just animated with it. So nothing is actually parented or grouped. It's just that. So that's a very simple way to be able to animate a piece of text coming onto the screen and going off the screen. You could even do, if you look online, these are very popular. Sometimes they'll do those multiple things. Like if my thing is Sarcona animation, it'll say Sarcona animation, and then if it says, you know, video 1, then another one will go across the bottom and say video 1. So these are used like all over the place. You could even, in this case, I've animated the shapes too. So I could animate just the position of each one itself, or I could go in like we've done before and grab the path points and animate the actual path points to move around. That way I can kind of shrink the size of the box or make the box bigger or whatever, okay? So that one's pretty simple. I'm not going to walk through that one too much. That's another way you can do it. It looks like the glide logic is actually cut out of this. It's just black text with a black background right there, so it looks like it's cut out. If I just change the color, then obviously you'll see that it's just regular text. Okay. This one. So this one relates closely to what we did last time. There's a difference between listening and waiting for your turn to talk. So with this one, this part up here, it's the same way we did the other one. It's just using an animator. I'm animating the position and I believe the scale of the letters kind of flipping into place. And you can see them, it's slight, but like right there, if I turn off motion blur, there's that letter kind of streaking in. Okay. The only difference here is this line that kind of goes around it. Okay. And we've already done that before too, so I'm not going to go into too much detail with it, but I used the pen tool and I just created a shape like so. I told the fill to go bye-bye and I pulled the stroke up. Okay. And then from here, just to animate it, I went to my add, and then just like before, I used trim paths. Okay, so we've used trim paths before to animate stuff like this. So just using that offset or that end point or start point, I could animate it. And the only thing that would be a little bit different here is I timed out so that when it says listening right here, that this line was fully under it. Initially it wasn't, it was like half under it, and I wanted to make sure it really hit it. So then I went into that shape, and you'll see how many keys I have on here just to kind of line that up. So I went to like this point, and I said I'm going to play with this to get it to be right there. And I'm going to play with this one to make sure it's, you know, at a good spot there. Okay, very much like the line blip one we did where all the stars went out. That's how I'm doing that one, animating the start and the end. And then the same thing on this very end one, I wanted to make sure it says turn to talk, that when this came out, this was fully underlined. Again, I animated more of those properties. Okay, so nothing crazy different here. And you'll also notice that I have a little bit of a texture on the background of this. Here I had a, it's a more subtle texture, but it's still there. On this one, I used a new solid. Oops, right there. Effects controls. And I used a controller called add grain. So under effects, noise, and grain, I did add grain. This is one way you can add a little bit of just random noise to your stuff. Just for a future note, there's another one called dust and scratches. So very much like Photoshop's, if you have an image that does have a lot of stuff on it, you want to clean it up, this can help kind of clean it up. It can go too far sometimes, but it might be a good starting point. Okay. There's also other ones in here like match grain or add grain. Imagine you have a video that you shot. That video has noise in it regardless of where you got it from. There's some sort of noise in that video, okay? And if I put a new piece of footage in there, I need to make sure that those two items match the noise. So match grain is a good one to use because it'll literally say, what's this noise pattern doing? And I'm going to apply it to this other one, which is really awesome. Okay, so that's pretty much that one. That's the only thing I did different here was the add grain. You'll see there's a 4-color gradient that gives it the coloration. I do have my vignette on this one, and then here is my quote, and then here is that line. Nothing crazy there. I'm going to skip that one for a second. All right. Someone was mentioning how do I do this kind of like matrixy effect where I have all these like different letters that kind of like are random and then they display. So something like that. How would I do something like that? I'm going to just delete my word here just so we can start from scratch. Oops. I call it the matrix effect because that's what it looks like. And I'll pick a different color because that one I don't like. All right. Okay. So with this, you still use an animate. Okay. So in this one, I'm going to just use my opacity. Okay, and this will just turn off just like before. Oops. And then you still have your range selector, so you could do that. Okay, so that's one way we would animate it coming onto the screen. So I'm just going to hit a keyframe, go up a little bit, pull that up. Okay, so that has nothing to do with the actual effect of what I'm going to do. That just makes the transition of it coming on a little bit nicer. Okay, okay. Now I'm going to go to add here, and oops, actually I'm going to go to this one. If I go to add here and I go to this, I'm going to go to character offset, character value. If I go to either of these, it'll work. But the problem is it's going to be tied in with the opacity, and I may not want that. I may want to animate the opacity and the character values a little bit different just so I can see them more. Okay? So I'm going to go to this animate and over here, and it'll create a new animator, which allows me to then animate those two things separately. So I'm going to say character offset. And over here, I'll just crank this character offset up. And you'll see what it's doing is that it's taking whatever letter I was currently at, which was, in this case, E, and it's offset it, in this case, 44 characters, so it got to L somehow. Let's go to 0. There's E. There's 1. Oops. 2, 3, 4. Okay. The number doesn't matter. You just crank it up. Just go like crazy. There it is. Okay. So now if we watch this play, let me just set my start and end. Okay, you get a very quick effect. All right, so we get the, it's offsetting it and then clearing it basically. All right, if we wanted a little bit more animation to this, we can go to this add here. Hey, wait a minute, you added it in the wrong spot. Hold on a second. It did add it back to my same animator. I didn't want to do that. I'm just going to undo until I get that off. There we go. I'm going to go here and then go to animate and say character offset. There we go. So now I get a second animator. And now I will do the same thing. Like that. There we go. That's what I wanted. Okay. So now it offsets each one of these. Okay. And it does it for each letter. So you can see like the two C's here, those were F's. They're both C's. I may not want that, obviously. Now I can animate this range selector here and control this. There we go. That's better. Okay, so I'm just going to copy these keyframes, go to this start. And just so you can see if I paste it in the same spot, I'll get the same result I had a second ago. But now I can adjust where that position is. So that way there's a little bit more of a delay in the letters coming in there. I'll go even further just so you can see it more. Like that. Okay. Now what I want to do is have this effect be a little bit more like changing. Right now it's pretty much like one letter changes, then one letter changes, then one letter changes. So on this animator I'm going to add another prop or another selector down here. And what these are is, this is a range selector, so it's going from 0 to 100. That's what we're animating it to. So if I go to add one of these selectors in here, what it's going to do is allow me to give it a variety of stuff. So it's not just 0 to 100. I could actually kind of change it a little bit as it's going. Typically, I'll use this wiggly one. The range one is already there. That's what we're seeing. The wiggly one. And what this allows me to do is then have an expression basically on top of the range selector, which should make it look even cooler because now it's going to go like this. So you'll see that each letter is changing as it's moving. So before it wasn't doing that. Okay, and you'll also see that the two F's here are not the same letter anymore, which they were a second ago. Eventually they'll pop into place. Okay, and I can grab these and move these around. Okay, so you can feel free to add this little wiggly range selector on there, and that will give you a little bit more randomization. If I disable the animator here, so I just click the eyeball for it, that's what the opacity only looks like. And if I add the wiggly here, we'll get this kind of like strobe lady effect. Cool. I don't like it on there though. So I'll take it off. Okay. Now there are, let me just close all of these. Come on. Oh, I locked you. Of course I did. Why wouldn't I? There we go. We'll just set that over here. And the cool thing about these is I can move it wherever I want and it still all works. Okay, that's cool too. All right. Do not use. Okay. So under your effects and presets, over there where I typically type stuff in, there are a whole bunch of animation presets in here, and there are a whole bunch of text animation presets. Now the problem with these is that they're basically like drag and drop. They automatically put in all the values. Now the reason that that's a bad thing is because as someone who's being hired to be creative, that's not creative, right? Just dragging anything in there is not creative. Also, if they need to change something, you don't know where that is if you don't understand the controls. So in this class, do not use any of these preset animators because they are exactly that. Just so you can see what they do, if I go to Central Spiral and I click on this, okay. Now, if I threw that in my demo reel, somebody who uses After Effects is going to know that's a drop-in. I know that plugin. Unless you've gone through and changed stuff and modified it, okay? So you can definitely use those as examples of things, ways to animate stuff in, but don't use it as the only way you're animating it. You use it as a, how did they do it? Now let me see if I can recreate it and change it and make it my own, okay? Because if you look at their stuff, you'll see they've added the spiral. Let's call it spiral. So they have the spiral right there, then they have the fade in. The spiral is just a rotation, and then the fade in is that. So they've done the exact same thing we would have done, just adding the fade in plus this rotation. That's all they've done, okay? So do not use any of these. Again, you can use them as, you know, examples of things you could do. Let me find a better one. Here's typewriter. So this is what we used before was typewriter. There we go. Boom. And you'll see it's the same thing. Opacity is just changing from 0 and then popping in. Okay? So do not use those for your actual pieces. Use those as references for figuring out different ways you could do stuff. Okay? Cool. So let's jump to this one here. So this one is a little bit fancier. You probably have seen these if you've looked at any After Effects videos. There's a lot of people doing these kinds of like really hard shadow text pieces or even graphics on there. So I'm going to break it down into just the words here. So the way that this works is I've drawn out the word. Okay, so I went into my text tool and I typed the word evolve. That's what that says if you couldn't read it. And then I found a good scripty font that looked like it blended nicely together. Yeah. Oops. I think I just passed it. No, I didn't. And you could do this in Illustrator too. Draw these out and just import that in. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to work with fonts inside of Illustrator to move stuff around. Where's the font I used? It should have been like right there. It's not that one. No, I didn't. It's a different font. Alright, I'm just going to skip to the thing where I have it, and then I will see what font I use. Vladimir script, that's what I thought I used. There we go. Okay. So there's Vladimir script. That's why I didn't look right, because I had that on. Cool. Okay. So all the letters don't obviously blend together. If this were Illustrator, it'd be no big deal. I could just go in there and start kerning things together. You can do that in After Effects too. It's just a little bit trickier to do. So I have to grab the letter. So in this case, I'm going to grab the V. So I use my arrow keys to get to the left side. Then I use the right arrow, hold shift, right arrow again. And then I can start to use my kerning to start moving these closer together. So there's the V and the O are right on top of each other. I'll grab just the E and kern the rest of that into there. This is why it's not very good, because if you grab this and you start doing it, it's not the right one. See, that was already lined up. Now I could go to a different font and be able to select letters, but it doesn't help me here. Come on, get over there. Oops. And there goes the E. Okay, so that's how I got everything to look like it's all together. Now what I want to do is I want to create a track mat that will reveal the letters as they're being written, okay? So if I go to my pen tool, just like I did on this one here, okay, I'm going to create a path, and then I'm going to use a trim path to actually animate it and write it out. So if I go to that, and I just start drawing this out, let me give us some stroke on this, and we'll give it a color so we can see it. There we go. Whoops. And obviously in Illustrator we can create a little bit more look to this by kind of blending the letters together even more. Now, initially I'm doing this the bad way, and then I'm going to show you the correct way to do it, okay? Because I have to show you the wrong way, otherwise you'll just do it the wrong way and then say, oops. Okay. So now, theoretically, if we just did that, perfect. If I then go to my shape layer and I go to my add and I do a trim path right there, and let's go to the beginning, I'll animate my endpoint here, come up a little bit, and then pull the endpoint up. Okay, so now this writes it like that. So now we would think, I'll take the stroke down just so you can see that this wouldn't work just to do it like that, because this looks pretty horrible. Like, that doesn't look like the word at all. Okay. So I need to make sure that this is big enough, obviously, so that it covers all the white. Like so. And then I just go to the word evolve, and I make sure I use my track mat and say alpha mat. So now you can see there is the word evolve. No difference there. But now when we come back to the beginning and we hit play, it's writing it on the screen. Okay. Now what's cool about that is that was pretty quick. The bad part is it was quick because it's not going to look perfect. As I hit play, watch what happens in some of these areas, like right here. Do you see how it's like half of a letter is right there? And then when we get there, there's like a chunk of the letter, and there's part of the V, and then there's that happening, and then there's this happening, like that, okay? The track mat is just this big blob that goes around it that shows transparency. It reveals it. So the thicker it is, the more it's going to reveal. The problem with this font is that there are thicknesses and thinnesses, And there are areas that obviously overlap. Like right there, these overlap. Right here, there's a lot of overlap. So I need to be able to control these basically like per letter, okay? So what I did, I'm going to delete this because that's obviously the wrong way to do it. I right-clicked on this, and then I said create shapes from text. Okay, and what that does is it takes my word evolve, and it makes a shape for each one of my letters. Okay, so now if I were to open this up, and I open the contents, you'll see I have a shape for each one of these letters. All right, so now what I need to do is duplicate this as many times as there are letters. So when you do this one, don't pick a crazy long word, like 6 is a good amount. So I duplicate this 5 times so that I get 6 of them. And then I just go through and I delete the ones that I don't want. So I deleted all of these stuff but E from this one. So I'm going to call this one E. And then I open this one up. And I'm going to click on the other ones. I'm just using Control key. And this will be V. And you can see where I'm going with this. Just delete those. Whoopsie. And that's O. Okay, so you get the idea. I would then delete the other ones from that. So what you should end up with is each one of these layers is just a letter. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is an individual track mat per letter. Okay. So I'm just going to jump to delete that. Delete that. I don't need that. There we go. I'm going to jump to this one. And you'll see here is my letter E. That's all by himself. And then right above it is the track mat for just E. Okay, so there's my tracing of the letter E. And then to that shape, I did just the alpha track mat. And so now that one reveals the letter E only. And then I did one for V, I did one for O, one for L, one for V, and one for E. Now L and E, if we look at those two letters, L has a thickness thing here. Okay, so right now this is a thin line. And then when we get up here, it starts getting thicker. So I actually have 2 masks for L. One for the thin line, and then once we get past this little cross here, then we can do a thicker line out there. So if I look at just L's mask, you'll see I have 2. This one and that one. And they don't have to look pretty, it's just something revealing it. So I timed them out so that they match together. Okay, so here's mask 1, trim path, that's all it is. I just drew the path, added a trim path, and then animated it like that. And then I added another shape right after it to continue. Okay. And then once I created those, I'll show you, I grabbed both of these. Okay, so here is where they were. I just right-clicked and did a pre-compose, dropped them into a new composition, and then that allowed me to do a track mat. And the reason I had to do that is because I can't have a track mat on 2 separate layers. It has to be on 1 layer. So I had to combine them into this 1 layer right here. Okay, so there's that layer. Where I did the E at the end, same thing. It was thinner here, and then it got thicker. So once I crossed this area right there, then I was able to go thicker and then get the rest of it. Now, because this one actually had 2 of the same letter, the V and the V, I just duplicated those layers and scooted them over. Okay? And then the rest of this was just timing it out. So this is what it looked like when I was done. Okay, and that looks stupid. So then I waited for the E to get to a certain spot, right there. And then I took the 2 that are part of the V letter and I just moved that down. That way it looks like the E gets written and then that flows right into the V. Now that could probably come back a couple frames just to help blend that a little bit better. There we go. And then the same thing for the O. I just kind of watched where the V was hitting where the O is right there. And I moved the O into position. Okay, and that's just going to help blend one from the other. Don't make it more complicated than it is. It literally is a nice piece of text and then just a track matte following that shape of what I want to reveal. Okay, that's all that piece is. Okay, now once I had all of this, I just pre-composed it again. That way when I went to my actual scripty word, I had one layer that was that evolve. Okay, that's all that is. And because I just changed it a second ago, now it's obviously off again. I have to fix it. Let me just fix that real quick. Right there. There's my L. Here's my V. There's my E. Sweet. Okay, back to scripty word. Okay, so now we're back to where we were before. Nice little blend. Now at some point you may get the speed of them is off. Like maybe one is taking, like the E goes whoosh, whoosh, and then the V goes really slow. Just move your keyframes. That's not a big deal. Get used to moving around between compositions, between layers, between effects, finding out where you need to work on stuff to get it to look correct. Okay? Cool. So now to get the shadowy part, which is that, what I did was just like before when I created that reflection and the shadow, is I just duplicated it. So I would have it on a separate layer. And then I added some effects. So let me just duplicate this and we'll just make this from scratch. So it has to be on the bottom. That works the best. I'm going to go over here. And there's a thing called CC radial blur. Okay? Just so you can see, there's in Photoshop, oops, let me click there, under the blurs, there is a radial blur here. This is not the same one. This radial blur is, where is it? Zoom here, there we go. And I have a center point, and I have an amount, okay? So see how this one does like this, like perspective kind of blur. We don't want that because everything behind the letters I don't want. I want to basically just start at where the letters are and go forward. This one does not do that. So CC radial blur does do that. So if I click on CC radial blur and drag it onto there, or drag it onto here, or double click it, it'll apply it to whatever layer selected. Okay, and it did it to the wrong layer because I had the wrong layer selected. I will click there, just double click. There we go. All right, so now if I do this, it's set to scratch, so that's what it's going to do. So I'm going to say straight zoom, I believe. Yep, that's it. Center, same thing. And so you see how as I move this one around, it's not doing what the other one was doing, which is like stretching it out that way. I think if you change this to centered zoom, that it would do that. Yep. And then fading zoom fades it off a bit. Okay. So this is basically just controlling the direction of that shadow. Then what I need to do is take basically this information and I just need to harden it so that it's not soft, okay? So under Effect, under Matte, under Matte Choker, not Matte Choker, yeah, it was Matte Choker, okay. Effect, Matte Choker, yes. I'm gonna go to the, wait, what happened here? This. Oh, there it is. Okay. I'm going to go to this choke, and I'm going to put it... Oh, I turned it off. In the negative, okay? And what that's going to do is it's going to take my shape, and it's going to make it even harder. And if I take my softness down too, that should help harden it up also. Do I need to play with anything else? Yep, there we go. And I'll take the gray softness level up to 0, okay? So you'll see what this gives me is a very hard edge. Now if I play with this a little bit, I can actually create maybe a little bit of value in there just to create something besides just like a flat color if I wanted to. Let me drop my word back on top of it. And now to color this, we can use a bunch of different things. So we've looked at hue and saturation before, we could use that. The one that I used was tint. Play around with different ones because you'll find that some of these are just easier to use for what you're trying to do. So in this case, I'm just going to map the white to, I think I dropped this color here. There we go. Okay, and so we create that look of that kind of shadow. And again, none of these things are set in stone. I could always go back to these settings And I could add a little bit more softness to this. Oops, not too much though. I could take that gray level up if I wanted to tweak it, or I could harden it. And then the rest of this is just playing with what's a good angle. So I found that if I went this way, the E was too dominant, and you don't get the shadow effect on all of it. So watch how ugly this one looks. The E comes in, and then we don't see the shadow being drawn on anything else. It's still drawing, but we can't see it because the E has basically created a shadow for everything. If I go to the other side of this, like that, then we get to see pretty much the whole thing getting drawn. Okay, I think I still need to take this. This is like still looking ugly there. So I'm going to take that softness all the way off. There we go. Sweet. Okay, so again, something else that you can add to your playlist of things that you can do. We also had the question, you know, can we do different things with other track mats, different ways we can animate text? Sure. I want 3 differently animated text things, okay? So however you want to do those 3 different ones is up to you, but again, they have to be 3 different ones, not the same one 3 times, or the same concept 3 times. One sec. So like this one and this one that I did last time, I count those as the same exact thing, okay? Because these 2 are pretty much the exact same thing. Something like this one is different. That's kind of an easier one, so it's kind of like a gimme. And something like this one is obviously a different one. Yes, ma'am.
So what I was going to ask in question to what counts as what is different is, like that video you showed us, is it just like either just 3 different completely things, like what you're altering to the text, or is it like 3 renditions of your whole quote?
No. Whatever you want to do. So for this type of effect, I would never use a quote for it because it's too long.
Right.
Okay? So for this one, I can grab just a word. If you have a company name or a logo or whatever it is and you wanted to do something fancy with that, you definitely could with that also. Okay? So let's use that as an example too. So let's say that that's my logo right there. I'm going to just duplicate this, or I'm going to copy it and I'll just make a new composition. 960, 30, 10 seconds, perfect. Paste it. There it is. Okay. So here's my quote. I'm just going to cut it because I just want to get the wording. I don't need any of the fancy stuff on there. So I could animate this a bunch of different ways. So one of them, let's say that I did draw a mask in here. So I went like this, and then I duplicated this layer. I hit my mask button. I said invert, and so now I have that. Okay, it looks exactly the same, but I have 2 layers now. One is the top of my word, one is the bottom of my word, right? So right there and right there. Cool. So let's say that I took this and this. Oops, I didn't want that on there. I wanted a new layer, and then I wanted this, and then I wanted this, and that. Okay, so now I just have a stroke going across. I could use my trim path. This trim path you use like all the time. It's crazy. Okay, there. Come up a little bit. There. I'm going to make this thinner so it doesn't look so disgusting. There we go. 10. Don't worry about the colors. Just ignore the colors for now. All right, so it was like that. Don't worry about the speed. This is, again, just a quick little demo. That looks like that's about the halfway mark. Yes, okay. So once I have this where it goes like that, then I could animate each half of this like coming out of that box, right? So I could do, this is the top half here. So I'm just going to make a new shape on the top, like that. I'm going to go to this shape. I'm going to animate its position moving up. Okay, so now it goes, and then I'll just use this, just like we did before, as a track mat. Okay, so ignore the bottom for now because we don't see it. So it should go bloop. And then obviously the bottom would come out too. Okay, so that's another way you can animate text. There's a whole bunch of different ways you could do it. I just want to see you experimenting and playing with at least 3 different ways.
Okay.
Now, going beyond in this one, you could add 4, 5, 6 different ones in here. You could play with a bunch of different techniques on top of this one. This one we're gonna wrap up by next week, Wednesday. I'm gonna start introducing the next assignment. Wait, what is today? Today is Monday. Holy cow! Next week, Monday, we're gonna start introducing the next assignment. Okay. So basically, next class will just be a lab day to continue working on these. Next Monday, I'll introduce the next assignment. It won't be due until Wednesday of next week. Okay. Once you get your 3, then the same process that we did on the page transitions will pop in. You'll go to your import. Still organizing. Organize. See, I have a folder that says organize, so I know I'm organizing. 1900. Title sequence. Here is my title sequence template. There it is. And I'm just going to go into this, into my compositions. Okay, so here's my title sequence. Remember the ones that we did before? And then I'm just going to go into my final comp. I'm going to go into this. Oops. Click the right thing. Come on, there you go. Nope. I will just find the right thing. Page transitions. There we go. So this would be title. Oops. Text transitions. And then this would be assignment number 2. Okay. And then I will take my final comp plus my other comps. See how many I have already? I have a million. Here's my vignette one that I want. Here's my scripty word. Here is my listening. Here is my glide lock. Here is my best reaction 01. Perfect. So I just drag these all to the new comp button. I'm going to say sequence layers and hit OK. So this is what I end up with is my title, text transitions, assignment 2, everything is spelled right. And then it goes into that one, then it goes into the next one, then it goes into the next one, and then it goes into the next one. Okay. You don't have to add transitions into these, but it definitely would be awesome, wouldn't it? Have a little page transition or something happen. If you do, obviously you have to plan for that because this one starts right away. Okay? So I'd have to make sure that I went into this comp, scooted all my animation down, and allowed time for that page transition to come in. Okay? Again, that's something going beyond. Definitely do it. It's not required, though. Make sure, too, that once your transition happens, look at all the time that I have left on that thing. I don't want to have that time in the actual video. Okay? So I can cut it here, and then just bring in the next one. Obviously, leave it on there long enough to be able to be read. Okay, so that one's done. I'm going to cut it and then bring in the next one. And here goes this one. Oops, that one's gone. Cut it, bring in the next one. That one's done. Cut it. Cut my layer here. Trim my comp. Add this to my render queue. I don't know what that's doing there. QuickTime H264. Hit OK. If I had audio, I would choose the audio that fits whatever audio I have. So I don't think I have any audio in this one specifically, but just so you can see some of the typical audio stuff you might have, let's say that I had this right hook here. Okay, when you bring it in, you'll have a couple things. This says 44,100. Whatever your lowest one is, go with that. Okay, and that's gonna downgrade all your stuff. Like, you guys know what CDs are? Okay, so CDs are 44,100 kilohertz. That's a pretty good resolution. That's like audio resolution. If you had an 8,000, that's pretty horrible resolution, but you'd have to play your games and see. 8,000 sampled up to 44,000 might sound incredibly horrible, but 44 down to 8 may sound tolerable, okay? So you could actually do it at either one. So what you would do is under here, you would specify 44.1 because that's my lowest. It's 16, and it's stereo. And then you can go to the format options, and on your little cheat sheet, I think I used Apple Lossless. I think that was it. And then hit OK, and then you go to your not yet specified. You put this in the correct folder. Organize here, there. Movies, Sarcona, text. I forgot what even called this one. Transitions, right? And then you'll hit the render button again. Okay. Make sure you're adding easy ease in where it's appropriate. Make sure you're adding the graph editor where it's appropriate. Make sure you have motion blur on most things that you're animating. Vignettes are nice. Add them. Keep them soft. Play with some of these other effects too, like having a reflection, having shadows, having something else down there, so it looks like it's more of a scene instead of just like here is a piece of boring text, right? And obviously pick something that's kind of like you want to do. Also, now that I'm thinking of it, you could add other stuff to your text too. So if I had a fancy word like evolve and I wanted to have some flourishes or something else happen on the screen, you could definitely add those too, like these kinds of things. So I could have my evolve be written the way it was, and then I could also write these out using the same kind of technique. Break them apart into different layers, and then use the trim path to draw each one of these pieces out. Okay? Or you could add other stuff to the top of it, like if you're drawing this kind of like loopy thing and you want to have like a little like blip or blink or something at the end of it, you could add that again on top of it. Okay? Now that we've gone through the page transitions and the blips and the title sequence, and this one, you have a lot more skills that you can start adding to your stuff. Don't add them just to add them. If it adds something to it, it makes it a little bit more lively, then add it. But don't just add lightning and rain and whatever else, 1,000 different effects. I had someone, let's just grab a different comp here. And I may have even shown this, I don't care. It's still worth pointing out because people forget. There are crazy effects inside here. So one of them is strobe light. They added strobe light. Okay. Now by default it does this. Okay. But if we do the duration, and I change my color, strobe period in seconds. There we go. So he had that, and then he had, I don't know what that's, fog light? That's something else. Let's just add his holy light. Maybe that's something. If I draw a mask in here, I'm sure that'll do something. Nope, I lied. Generate advanced lightning, so we had that on there. And then that was blended in with the rest of it. Oops, get rid of this radial blur. Hey, we're having a strobe light. Did I get rid of it? I did. Dang it. So the order does matter too where you put these. So I put that on top. Over that. Random strobe. There we go. That's good. Random. Perfect. There we go. So we had that, and then this was animated, so the lightning was actually like going back and forth. So we had it going with all that. And it was just like way too much stuff, okay? That doesn't add anything to the design of it. It doesn't help get your message across. With all these text ones, it's starting off as just text, but these are things that you could use to animate a logo. You could use them to animate anything. Anything text related, obviously. Okay? Sweet stuff. There's even one